Okay. So for you new people, the recording I will post this on YouTube as a public thing afterwards. So if you want to get into stuff that you don't want to be made public, let me know and I can pause the recording. Or otherwise it will be public. Yeah, that's okay. A lot of people, I say this all the time and it's worth repeating. No matter what you say, somebody's going to get value out of it. A lot of people watch these videos and it helps them because they can relate to what you say, regardless of where you're coming from or what it is you say. So yeah, enjoy that, everybody, and welcome everybody. Welcome, 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 welcome. Yeah.
Yes, Vince. I'm sorry about the last meeting.
No worries.
I was speaking about another person, and it wasn't wise.
Yeah.
Yes, like I said, I'm prone to doing stupid things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
No, that'll work itself out. I'm happy to go either which way. So if he oh, Alan.
What's going on?
Alan's just shared his screen for us.
Really?
Yeah. Probably that was my problem in that.
There we go.
There you go.
There we go.
I enabled screen sharing for anybody. So
Right.
yeah, but don't do it unless we need to for some reason. Yeah.
Vince, it won't be posted. Yes.
It won't be posted unless you're going to talk to them about that.
I talked to them and they would like not to post it at all.
Okay, all right. Well, in which case, I won't post it.
They feel very unsafe.
Fair enough. Yeah, I understand. So I won't post it. So that'll simply be one session that won't go up as. I won't even put it up as unlisted. I'll just not put it up. There's so many hours of what we do here already up there that I'm sure that won't be missed. And if anybody that is on the notification list wants it, I'll make a note to that. If anybody wants it, I can give that to them individually rather than put it up publicly. So yeah. Yeah. It's a bit of a trick, isn't it? Because I want everybody to be both authentic and spontaneous. And in this case, Bianca was talking about somebody else without their knowledge, and it only became apparent afterwards that may have been inappropriate. I mean, I wouldn't say technically it was a privacy issue, but it was a privacy issue, I guess. So, and she didn't, and because we're spontaneous and authentic here, it wasn't something that we realized until later on. Yeah. And the other thing that I'll mention is that you can see that people as Yana and Paul and Phoebe who've got a picture of themselves up, but they're not actually showing their video, Ramiz. So I won't ask them to be active as a result of that. That's my indication that they don't want to be active. Whereas all of you who are showing your face, you're fair game. You'll be asked to be saying something at some point. If we can get through to everybody. Yeah. Okay. And as far as aims, outcomes, or whatever, it's open. I want you to be spontaneous. So don't put your hand up and ask to be heard. Just jump in. If there's a space, jump in. If people find themselves talking over somebody else, it'll resolve itself. No worries. So just, yeah, do be authentic, do be spontaneous. Don't hold anything back. That's the best way you're going to get value out of it. Okay. So who wants to go first? Who's got something they want to talk about?
Well, I'll jump in.
Yep.
Head first, feet first.
Yeah.
Good evening, all. So last
Okay.
week, you all wonderfully give me your feedback and put input in, and it was Paul Simpson mentioned one thing, and I think the term he used was that which knows. We were trying to get over me being wrapped up in myself and lost, and I think that was the term. That rather than myself, there's something that knows that I'm thinking or something that knows that I'm sensing. And I realized during the week that I actually don't have a clue about what that is. like in the sense that it was just a thought that I thought. You with me? I was thinking about what it is. And my understanding, and this is a thought, is that it's something beyond that. But if it is something beyond that, I've not been in touch with it and don't know what it is. So that's where I am with that. There you go.
I'll let Paul address that one.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
There are two kinds of people that come in to Liberation Unleashed: those who are identified with their thoughts and cannot unidentify with them, and those who are identified with their thoughts but can unidentify with them. And when I say they can unidentify, that means they have the ability to step back and look at thoughts objectively as an object. And most of the people who leave the process at Liberation Unleashed just can't separate out. So when you say you can't, there's something other than the thought, that tells me that you are, which I've already known all along, you're heavily identified as your thoughts, and you're having difficulty stepping back. This is the exercise that I do occasionally, where I ask you to step back and take some thought, possibly a troubling thought, a thought that you identify as, and put it up on a chalkboard and try to show you that it is not you. Because when people say you are identified as your thoughts, people think they're talking figuratively. What I say is, no, they're talking literally. You are that thought. Your identity is whatever that thought is. If you say, I am John, or I am Mary, or I am James, there's a literal belief that that thought is an entity in a sense. I mean, the word identity, if you take away ID, you're left with entity. And that's why I tried to point out, does it have any of the characteristics of an entity? Does it know anything about you? No. Does it have any power to do anything? That thought alone. Can it imagine the future? So the idea of the exercise is to get you to step back. And when I say that which knows, technically what I say is just the knowing. And here's what I'm talking about. When you say, right now, you are knowing what's going on, aren't you?
Yes. I think I do.
Okay.
But
Now,
yes.
okay. I think I do. All right. That thought, before that thought came up, I think I do. You were knowing, weren't you?
Yes.
Okay. So the knowing came, and then the thought, I think I do. Right?
I don't know if you can all hear me, but my Zoom is completely locked up.
Well, I can hear you.
Oh, go on, keep going then.
Okay. Now, you said go ahead and keep going. The knowing was there, wasn't it, before you said go ahead and keep going?
Yes. There was something there.
Okay.
Yes. And I wasn't thinking about it. Yes, it just happened.
Okay. And the knowing was there before you said what you just said, wasn't it?
The trouble I'm having, I'm sure you're right, but the trouble is I'm having is as soon as you say that, I'm thinking about, oh, was it there?
Yes, but you are knowing before you're thinking, aren't you?
I'm sure that's right, but that's where I'm struggling.
But you know what I'm saying, don't you?
Yes, there's this recognition of the words you're saying. Yes.
Okay, you were knowing, and then you just said yes, but there's the recognition of the words you said. So the knowing was there before the words, yes, but there's a recognition of what you're saying. Do you see how the knowing is always there ahead of the identifying thought?
Okay, conundrum.
Okay,
Everything we're talking about is in the past. Yeah, you're saying like my knowing precedes these words. Yeah.
yes, it just did.
So the knowing, when you're asking me about the knowing, I'm accessing a memory about what happened a second ago, 10 seconds
fine.
ago. Yeah. And as soon as I access that memory, where I feel I am is thinking about it. So when you say, oh, there was the knowing, I'm sure there was, but I wasn't there in that moment realizing there was the knowing.
Yeah, but you were, because you knew to access a memory, didn't you? The knowing came before the accessing the memory, didn't it, of the past?
Looking back, yes.
You're knowing right now, aren't you?
No, I agree with you intellectually, but that's where I'm stuck. Is the fact
No,
that as soon
it's
as
not
I start
intellectual.
saying,
Do you know what's going on right now?
yes,
All right, that's the knowing. Now, if a thought comes up, you will know of that thought. Doesn't matter what thought comes up. Doesn't matter what comes up next. Right now, you are knowing. Knowing is ongoing. It's not a knower. Knowing is ongoing. Every second as experience changes, knowing is changes. But you are always knowing. You are knowing right now. You are knowing what I'm saying. You are knowing what's going on. And you will know when the next thought comes up. And the point is, the knowing is your essential nature. The thoughts are objects that show up. Do you see that?
okay. I feel as though I see it, but how about this as an example?
Okay.
You know, when you talk back about babies, they know, yeah, because they're
No,
not thinking, oh, I'm seeing my mother or I'm
no, they
seeing
don't.
yellow.
They don't
They
know
don't think
anything.
anything, yeah?
An infant
It-
just has neurovascular system operating. There are no objects in the brain. That's not knowing.
Exactly. Yeah, so when,
Okay.
oh, that's not knowing. Okay.
That's
So
just
where does,
awareness, naked neurological happenings. The eyes are working, the optic nerve is working, and the visual cortex is working, but they don't know what they're seeing. There are no objects in the knowledge base. Now, as they
okay,
get older, the objects are created. You're told at some point, this is a pen. And then in the knowledge base, there's a pen. So whenever the
yeah,
visual meets this from now on, it is known that that is a pen.
yeah,
But it's also it's the thought. If I pick this up and say, what is this? You say it's a pen, but you already know that. The knowing is quiet. Thoughts come up out of it, but thoughts are
okay,
not you. The knowing is you. And it sounds like a subject, but I'm using the word subject as a placeholder only, not an object. The knowing is always there. You knowing right now. And thoughts that say, I am James, or I am this, or I grew up here, those are all objects showing up in consciousness, in the knowing. It sounds like I'm
okay.
splitting hairs, but I'm not. It's bigger
Oh,
than that.
No, sometimes hairs have to be
Can
split.
I,
I want to interrupt briefly because I think it's an important point. I just have a sense, James, that you're onto something very, very deep. That's deeper than the non-dual Advaita Vedanta, and that if you persist in that, you may actually realize that logic breaks, everything breaks, and insights are over. So I don't know if that is the case, but I just get that sense. And I would encourage you to stay on that, and I'd be happy to connect with you about that if you're interested.
Definitely, please, we'll PM each other or whatever, yeah?
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
I want to jump in here.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, just
No, go on.
yeah, we're all going to see things from a unique perspective. So everything's a little different for each of us. And so even though we might have quite a few guides here who do guiding, we're all going to come at it from a different perspective. We all have a different way of looking at these things. So what I see, what Paul is trying to do for you, I imagine that you already know that. And that is that idea that Paul is propagating about there being a knowing upon which everything else rests. I see that, and I'm not sure whether Paul does, but my idea of it is that that is a staging point. That is, the purpose of that is for you to disidentify with the ideas that you've got about yourself. Right. So
Duality 101.
yeah. So it is a case of learning to be dual so that you can move on to the non-dual, if that's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So the way I would put it is I would say that knowing that Paul's talking about, I would say that's a mystery. I don't know anything about that. It's not, and this is where I think I can really understand what you're saying, and that is that knowing can only be conceived of intellectually. You can't actually know the knowing, because it's like the eyeball can't see the eye. It can't see itself. So what I do is I just put it in a mystery bag. I have this giant bag like Santa has over his shoulder, and it's full of mystery. And out of that bag, that mystery bag, life emerges, events emerge, circumstances emerge, and pass through my awareness or consciousness and go back into that bag. And there's nothing exists unless it's come out of that bag and it's on the way back into that bag. And by the time I realize it's gone past, it's already done. So it's just a big mystery. That's the way I would see it. And I'm happy for that mystery. In fact, that mystery is what provides me with liberation and freedom. It is beautiful. I love my mystery bag.
Can I just
two
ask
things.
a question of Paul?
Oh.
When you say knowing, are you using that interchangeably in this context with awareness and consciousness, or are you talking about something different?
We can't hear you, Paul.
How about now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You have to be careful how you define your words. People throw words like consciousness and awareness. Knowing awareness is a good word, because it is naked awareness, which is just the sensorium operating. Knowing awareness is after you have the knowledge base of what the world is. The world is a series of labels. That's the knowledge base, I call it. And so, yes, Vince is right when he says the knowing is intellectual. It means the knowing knows what's going on, because the knowledge base of the conceptual world is already implanted. It's just that the knowing is kind of like the hard drive on a computer. It sits there quietly. It's like the seafloor. It's quiet. And thoughts which come up in active imagination rise up from the seafloor and pop, in a sense. So if I have knowledge right now in my everyday activity of what an ink pen is, But if I hold one up and I say, hey, that's an ink pen, that has popped up out of the knowledge base into active memory. And this is thoughts. This is the noisy area of the mind. Hey, I'm going on. I'm never going to be good enough this time. Blah, 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 blah. That's the noisy mind going on. When you identify as that noisy mind, that talking head, that's a misidentification of the subject. And I use that word loosely. The true subject is just simply knowing awareness, or you might call it even educated awareness, or knowing consciousness. It is that seabed where everything is known, but it's always quiet. It's identification, and like Vince says, it's a mystery, really. I'm intellectualizing it, but it really is a mystery because there's so much more down there than just the knowledge bed that we've learned. There's intuition, there's all kinds of other stuff down in the seafloor we don't know about, but we know what comes up into active memory, the thought train that drives everybody crazy. And people identify as that active talking head. And it's when you learn that all of those thoughts are just objects coming up in consciousness. They're not the subject. All of those thoughts, self-identifying thoughts, I am Paul, I did this, I lived here, all of those self-identifying autobiographical thoughts are the object in consciousness. The true seat of consciousness is just that quiet knowing. You follow me?
I think so. So the answer was that they are the same, more or less, then.
Yeah, they're
If
just
you
like-
Knowing
define
is
them,
just one, knowing that the way you're saying it, knowing is one facet of total consciousness and awareness, which is the subject, not the object we think.
right. In consciousness, I would qualify consciousness as knowing consciousness, because a person, a child is conscious, but they may not know anything. You have to have the element of neurological functioning going on and knowledge of what is being perceived. It's actually two facets of the same thing. Because when people say awareness, because if you ask a doctor about awareness, the first thing they'll say is the neurological functioning going on? And then are they oriented to time and space? That means, do they know where they are? So you have to always say, when you say is awareness and consciousness and all that's the same, you have to qualify it with your definition. Is it just conscious, or is it knowing consciousness? Is it awareness, or is it knowing awareness? And it always sounds like I'm splitting hairs, but it's important to realize the difference between the hard drive and the active memory, because if you think you are the active memory of that constant thought train, that's where suffering lies. Seeing all that as a bunch of nonsense, as we frequently describe it, that's where the peace comes in. The surface of the ocean rolls around, the seafloor is always quiet.
So a tiny baby then, before it recognizes anything without the knowledge of what things are or what objects are, what would you say their state was? Would you say that's consciousness or awareness, or do they mean the same thing?
Same thing. Except this cat knows when dinner time is. It's a biological machine. It doesn't know anything. There are biological needs taking place. If hunger takes place, it cries. This is not a biological machine. Has nothing to do with what we're talking about, which is the workings of the mind. I just use the baby as an example of what you're not.
No, it's just something I've been thinking about recently, because obviously a baby can feel pain. A baby can be conscious or unconscious, physically. I think it's just something my mind was playing with, really, but it just felt, just
Yes.
important to understand perhaps the
No,
context in which you were saying,
no.
because I see.
It's conscious or unconscious, but it doesn't know that it is conscious.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
You will
I
say
wanna
that
jump-
it's
I want to
conscious.
jump in here. I want to say this. Your mind is going to lead you astray every time. Do not follow why questions or how questions. They're always diversions. You're never going to get satisfaction from those questions. They're bottomless rabbit holes that your mind wants to take you down. There is a lot of stuff here that you will never understand. And although you can get a bit high trying to understand them, it's like a drug, you want to keep doing it because you feel good, because you think you're on the cusp of something. You're on the edge of understanding. It's a mind trick. Don't do it. Don't go there, right? You use some discipline and dismiss it. That's my advice to you. But as we're talking here, a story popped up here that would be a great metaphor: artificial intelligence. Okay, we're seeing ChatGPT and some of those artificial intelligence that are language based, and they're a great example for us as people about what we do. Now, you've got this artificial intelligence that's got access to everything on the internet. It's read everything that there is to be read, and it can do it all so fast because it's just ones and zeros or whatever. And so you can ask that artificial intelligence, do you know of the coding that makes you possible? And that artificial intelligence will say, yes, I know I am coded. And then you ask it, do you know what that code is? And it will say, no, it can't understand. But what it can do is it can replicate it. It can do things with it, but it cannot know of the computer that it runs on. It can know that it runs on a computer, but it cannot access the computer as something separate that it runs on. And neither can you. You can't access the computer that you run on. It's beyond the capability of the human mind to do that. So don't try. You'll spend the rest of your life trying to do it. Don't. Put it in the mystery
Yeah,
bag. That's the easy way.
Yeah.
yeah. I think for me, it's just that I've sort of really it's finally sunk in that I am awareness. I'm not this. This is an object. And I've got a bit, so for me, I'm trying to explore awareness.
No, don't do that. Yeah, that's a staging post. Okay, it's a good one to get to realize that you're not anything other than awareness. And as soon as you get to that point, you can also dismiss awareness, because that's just another concept.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
So
not
I-
an identity. It's not a fixed thing.
If you identify as
best,
awareness, you're lost again.
It's kind of like a puff of smoke in the sense that it just moves constantly. It's not a static thing that you can lock on to. So just don't think of it as an identity. Awareness is just another placeholder, because when you discuss the world of objects, people are going to naturally say, well, where's the subject? So I just say, well, there is no subject, but just play like there's a placeholder over here, but there is no subject. It's just a figure of speech.
I can't categorically endorse Vince's recommendation to dismiss and push out of your mind all questions, because my path was finding logical contradictions that broke logic. So, and when that happened, I knew that there was nothing more to do as far as insight goes. So, I mean, for me, at least that worked, is, I engaged with the questions. And yeah, so I mean, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Bianca's got her hand up.
Yes, Paul, I wanted to ask on on an example of blind side. The blind, a person who thinks, well, who sense they are blind, they can see, but they can. the computer works, they see, but they don't know. They are aware of the sight, but they are not aware of being aware.
The blind
Blind sight,
sight.
yes. Do you know
never heard
what it
of-
is?
I
Might be
know
able to
blind
explain it
people
a bit
have
more.
a sense of vision, but I don't know what blind sight is. That's kind of a contradiction. I've never
I can explain it if you
heard of
like,
it.
Bianca.
I'm sure it's a thing, but I don't know what it is. But what
I
we're
can-
talking about is not a physical manifestation or a physical limitation here. It's just the way the ordinary mind works. Now, for a blind person, there would be limitations in the ordinary mind in that they might not have mental images and they might experience the world in a different way through tactile, through hearing, through smell, and
No,
things
no,
like
no.
that. But I'm not sure what blind sight is other than that.
It means
Explain it, Bianca?
that
Okay.
it means that a person sees, for example, on a monitor, there is a dot going up or down. And when asked, they answer correct if it's going up or down, more often than a blind, really blind person would. They see the movement, I mean, the brain recognizes the movement, but it doesn't show on the internal monitor, so to speak.
Oh, that's almost, you're kind of almost talking like with epileptics, when they sever the corpus callosum, then they can see things, but they may not register it as that thing. That maybe that's what you're talking about, but that's, again, that's an organic, that's a bodily thing. It's not really about the mind and thoughts and the knowledge base. That's more about, I get the impression you're talking about that physical limitation when people can actually see something, but it doesn't register what it is. And that's almost like unless somebody else knows what she's talking about.
Let me jump in here again, because
Go ahead.
it is an organic phenomenon, but it's very relevant to what we're doing. So in
Okay.
blind sight, if you look at a frog, it doesn't have a visual cortex. So it can see a fly and can strike the fly and all that, but it has no conscious awareness that there's a fly. And there are people, because of neurological damage, the visual signals don't get to the visual cortex, but there's this old, phylogenetic pathway in the brain that does process the information and does result in them seeing, but there's absolutely no conscious awareness. And so if you ask them, they will say, I didn't see anything, but they can, if they're experienced, they can navigate a maze or whatever. And I think it absolutely is relevant to what we're talking about. And I guess I'll give it back to you, Bianca.
It sounds a lot like the epileptic stuff where they cut the corpus callosum and then it's all kind of crazy stuff that comes up, but we're not really discussing neurological deficits here. I mean, I'm kind of just talking about what do you know and what thoughts come up and which do you identify with?
What's relevant what's relevant to me is that if you look deeply enough, everything is constructed in thought. Everything.
Yes.
Including that I'm seeing the color red. I'm not seeing the color red. There is no color red.
It's a conceptual world. Everything's a story.
Yeah.
We can't absolutely know what the shit's going on.
We can't know a damn thing.
No, That's the mystery that Vince keeps talking about. We really don't know anything. I mean, we're all just sitting around. It's the ultimate game of speculation, really. But I mean, what else we got to do?
Yeah. Good game if you like that sort of game.
That means your mystery bag literally has everything in it, Vince. So it's a big bag.
Mm. Yeah, if I could actually turn around and see it, it would be as big as the universe or even bigger. I don't know. Yeah. It has no weight, so it's not heavy. What it is a mystery too. A mystery containing a mystery. It's the acceptance of not knowing. That's what it is. Yeah. I can't know anything. I can only imagine anything, and I can include that I can imagine that I know, but I know it's only imagination. So I feel, Bianca, that your question was unresolved. That if a person has blind sight, they don't know that they know. They just react. And where Jeff is saying this is really relevant to us, and I think it is, and that is that we actually all have blind sight. We actually all just imagine that we know something. So we can analyze the frog and say, for example, that although it can't see a fly, if the fly is still, it relies on movement to respond. But it is actually only responding. And that's what we all do. We just respond. So somebody said it's turtles all the way down. I say it's stories all the way down, and that we just respond to stories all the time. And that's all there is. That's the only thing that's actual, that response. And we're responding to ideas that we have about things.
Yeah, the difference between the frog and us is we're talking as if we're conscious.
Yeah. And the frog is free from that. How I want to be a frog.
Vladimir has his hand up.
I missed that. Who's talking? Say again.
I was just going to maybe add one more thing to the blind sight observation. So I think what is particularly interesting about that is it's showing that a person can respond intelligently to visual input without having the subjective experience consciously of that visual input. The implication being, you know, the mystery bag, as Vince says, or the seabed, as Paul says, is, I don't know, the physics, the universe, the brain, like that unconscious region is still doing everything that it's doing. Even if the connection is broken, that would normally give that mystery bag or seabed the channel to give that information to the subjective conscious experience of what it's doing. But what question that raises for me, and I kind of would be curious to generalize this, is does the subjective awareness do anything? Or is it some sort of side effect that perfectly correlates? But the more I pay attention to just knowing awareness, the more it seems like it is not causally influencing anything. It knows everything, or not everything. It knows what it knows, but everything seems to happen on its own without causal input from the knowing awareness. So does it do anything, or is it just there? And I think the blind side kind of highlights that in some part.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. That's probably a big thing to appreciate as a seeker. we suffer from the illusion that there is such a thing as cause and effect. And cause and effect is just so simplistic. It's just crazy. We've been brought up to believe that one or two things will cause something to happen. We believe that there's a connection there. But if we examine it, we don't have to go very far to realize that nothing exists in isolation or even in a limited way. Everything is dependent on everything else. And everything else is way beyond our ability to know, to understand. So the fact that I raise my finger now could only happen if everything that's ever happened in the world happened exactly the way it did. If one thing was different millennia ago, that would be different. That's a shortened version of the story, but basically, if you investigate that, you're going to see that it's right. There is nothing as simplistic as cause and effect. That's a joke.
Yeah, and that simplistic cause and effect is a bad story. And the dependent origination story that you told is a better story, but it's still a story.
Still a story, exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of these stories, and it's like the awareness story or the knowing story, that they're valuable for a moment. They're valuable as a staging point to get to understand some other thing better. So if you see yourself as knowing or consciousness or awareness, it's one thing to say that's still identifying, but what it also says is that you can disidentify from being a self. So there's value in it for a moment.
Yeah.
And then you'll get to the point where you'll discard that as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Eventually,
Yeah,
the
but-
subject-object distinction breaks down, and there's just one thing. But it's easier to see this when you break them up in two, even though ultimately it may not be true.
And identity itself is a construct. You can't
Yes.
find identity anywhere.
Well, Cosmere, yes, the seabed just is. It doesn't cause anything. It knows everything. But when you say, is that all it does? Jesus, that's a lot. It knows everything, or it knows your conceptual world, which is a lot. So, but no, it doesn't do anything other than recognize. That's it.
Maybe I misunderstood the analogy. I was thinking of, in your analogy, the seabed is everything, but then the knowing awareness is only selectively aware when things rise up from that, sort of what is being known consciously. And that is the thing that I perceive to not do anything.
Yeah, on the
Subjective.
seabed, somewhere on the seabed, there's 1 square foot, and it says pencil. All right. Now, you're going through your day, you're not thinking about a pencil, but you know what a pencil is. And all of a sudden, somebody says, hey, you need this pencil to write your order down. Now there's a thought that has arisen up, an active thought, but that thought about the pencil was already in the seabed. It's like an air bubble that comes up and hits the surface and it says pencil. So the knowing is already there when the thought pencil comes up in active memory.
Okay,
It's
sure.
just easier to think of a computer. The hard drive doesn't say anything. It's what pulls up out of the hard drive onto the screen. And the only thing that can ever pull up on the screen out of the knowledge base is what you pull up, is what comes up. The hard drive never talks. It's just what comes up in active memory. That's the easiest way I have to remember it. It's otherwise it gets nebulous. when you try to put
So
it
yeah.
in neurological terms.
I think the better mapping of the blind sight question then onto this would be the screen that things can selectively appear in. So right now, in this present moment, you know, there's some screen in which things are being aware. Does that do anything? So in Jeff's example, the frog never has the fly on the screen. It's mental screen, right? There's no subjective experience of seeing the fly, and yet is able to get the fly. But you and I, when we look at a fly, there's a subjective experience of the seeing of a fly. But is that subjective experiencing doing anything? It doesn't seem to be necessary for or involved in any of the happening that takes place.
I don't know. You know, go ask the frog.
Yeah.
Because when you start making comparisons to other life forms, you don't know what a frog knows or what it doesn't know. Just stick with what you have with
Okay,
the
so-
human
so-
experience. A frog sees and reacts. In other words, somewhere in that frog, there is a learned, there's the knowing that a fly is food and it reacts to that. So when you
Sure.
ask what's on the active consciousness, what it does, well, I mean, one thing in active consciousness is the voice chatters away about any and everything. So is that doing anything or is that noise? I mean, how do you want to treat it? I don't know what active memory does other than see and recognize. And in other words, if you see food and you're hungry, so what does it do? It recognizes and it talks a lot.
Mm.
So I don't know how to
Well,
answer that question.
We
Maureen,
can't
go ahead,
ask the frog, any frog, but we can ask a blind-sighted person. And I've read that they never get confidence in their skill to see. They can know that they see, they are able to catch the ball or to pass by obstacles, but they never gain confidence. It's not like someone blind learning to move by sound. He can gain some confidence, yes, to relying on other senses.
Yeah. Okay, Maureen's got a hand up, but after Maureen has her say, I want to ask everybody, look, what I think we're doing now is we're philosophizing about
Yeah.
things. If you're bringing it back to your own experience, that's good value, but let's not philosophize. Talk from your own experience, please. That makes it more relevant to you. You're not going to get anywhere. It's just mind masturbation to philosophize about this stuff unless you can bring it back to your own experience. Sorry, go ahead, Maureen. And please don't raise your hand. I don't see your hand up a lot of the time. Just jump in.
Well, that's okay. You gave a perfect segue to me for what I wanted to ask about, which is my own experience. So, the seabed idea and the knowing seabed, I have been enjoying the experience of connecting to what might be my essence, or I assume it's consciousness. It's a new, well, it's something I've been able to connect to more, letting thoughts go. You know, what is there when you take the thoughts away and the emotions away and everything else, and connecting to this peaceful, unperturbable, supportive, loving, non-judge, like there's something that I can connect to, and it feels, and from how other people describe it, everyone's describing it exactly the same way. So it feels like this is something real, and and that this is the experience of this part of me, this essential part of me, this that isn't caught up in the world. And there's no past and there's no future. It is totally present. So I'm just confused. It doesn't feel like that's where knowing comes from. So I'm just wondering if we're talking about two different things.
Maureen, I want to ask you, when you say I want to switch your perspective around 180 degrees, right? So you say that you're connecting to something that you describe as your essence. It's peaceful. It's what's the word? You know what I'm getting at? Some wonderful, lovely place, right? What I want you to do is consider that. Would it be more accurate to say that not that you're connecting to some wonderful, peaceful place, whatever, that rather what you're experiencing is the absence of all of the stuff that keeps you away from that? Right? So it's not something tangible that you're connecting to. It's rather that you're not connecting to all of the chaos, all of the other stuff that was previously obscuring what you're describing.
Okay, certainly.
So you don't have to define anything now. See, when you were doing it from your perspective earlier, you're looking to define what it is that you're connecting to, and you're kind of recognizing that it's indefinable, but you're describing it, something that is really lovely. It's really peaceful. It's calm. It's just, and you use the word essence as a concept to kind of lead us there. And I know what you mean from all of that stuff, but I'm saying to you that that's a trap that you're walking into. That's like you're going to end up calling it consciousness or knowing or what, and you're going to identify with that. That's where the trap is. So what I'm saying is what the reality isn't that there is such a place or such a thing, that what you're experiencing is an absence of all of that other stuff. Is that
Well,
valuable to you? Firstly, is
I
it
don't
accurate?
You know what? I've been listening to Rupert Spira and also Shanti,
Yeah.
and to me, Rupert talks about who is the I am, like who is, if you take away everything that's distracting is of the world, the thoughts and emotions, and I mean, if you take all that away, do we cease to exist? No, there is something. There is something that is.
No, there's not. No, there's not. Okay, I have to
There
say
is nothing. We just
Rupert
gonna
is wrong, right? But I don't know about Rupert himself. Maybe he's just putting it in that way, just the way Paul put it, and just the way we were just talking about earlier, as a way of a staging point to understand that you're not what you used to think you were, right? That's all, right? I say if Rupert knows about that something, it's something I haven't experienced yet. So I don't know that Rupert's wrong, but I'm saying I can't do it that way. That I cannot know what that something is. right? And if I think that there is an actual something, it's a logical conclusion. It's another thought. That's all.
But what if it isn't a something? It is, as you said, the absence of all that I have learned to believe is myself.
yeah.
That all away, and that is what is
You can see
That-
that, can't you?
what is there.
I imagine that you can see that's part of your experience. It's not just an intellectual conclusion
Right.
you've got. Yes.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So why are you pursuing this thing of wanting to define what's left? What's left is there's nothing left that you can define. Why pursue it? You're going to drive yourself crazy trying to pursue that.
No, it doesn't. It's the answer is always the same every time. I'm not trying to learn more about it. It is I think it's a helpful, for one thing, it
It was
connects.
helpful for you. It's not anymore. That's my thoughts.
It's not anymore. Why?
No longer is it helpful for you because you're past needing it. You're past that point where you needed it.
I don't know about that. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's so. Like it's
Mm.
first of all, it's helpful in the understanding that there's no past and no future. It does not care or know everything that's come before. It is just
Yeah. And
total presence.
yeah.
And so that in itself is a helpful
But you're beyond that. You understand that you're not your thoughts. You understand that you're not that stuff that arose. You understand that you didn't do it, that it just happened. You understand all of that stuff. I believe, I imagine. Is that the case?
well, insofar as I went through Liberation Unleashed and went through the first fetter, but still there's habits of a lifetime and all
Okay.
kinds of things that get
Yep.
caught up.
Yeah. And you
And
know
to
that
be
just
able-
happens, don't you? Those habits, you know, they just appear because they're conditioning. You know that they're not you, don't you?
Well, I'm needing to remind myself. It's not like I get
Well, wait
pulled
a minute. Wait a minute. When it happens, right, and you remind yourself, are you then believing a thought for the first time, or are you just reminding yourself of something that you already have worked through? Okay, here's an analogy. You go to the fridge and you're looking for, I don't know, a peach. You open the fridge door and there's no peach in there. So you close the fridge door and you walk away and you go, was I right? Was there no peach in there? So you go back and you open the door and you look and there's still no peach in there. So how many times do you do that before you accept that there's no peach in there? How many times do you have to go back and remind yourself that you're not your thoughts and that you're not what arises, that's just
Well,
happening?
obviously more than I have yet done.
Okay, so you're
As-
stuck in feta too. You've got doubt. That's all.
Oh, sure, fine.
Yeah.
But wherever I am, when it's not doubt in that I think, well, maybe there is a separate self, but still there's these, my grandsons are fighting and I jump in and I'm sure, and then it's not till after they leave I go, oh, okay, well that I
Yeah.
can.
Okay, so that's just a stage that you're at. Let's put it that way. That how long will that jumping in afterwards happen for before you'll see it before you jump in, and then before it will become a non-entity at all. It won't a
For
non-event.
sure.
Yeah,
Of
that'll
course
happen.
that will happen.
Yeah. So then we start looking at Feta 4 and 5 stuff. We start looking at desire and aversion, because there's still identification there.
Oh,
Right.
and I'm looking forward to it, but I've gone to Feta 3 and I'm back at 1 because I want to really
Well,
cover
let
my
me tell you
bases.
this: one will always be there until it's not. Right, but there's remnants of it. That's what will happen. Right, it still happens for me. All these 12 years later, it's still that I still discover bits of Feta 1 that pop up. Right, and I don't know if it's actually Feta 1, because Feta 8 starts to talk about I am, and so we're still talking about identification. We're still talking about more subtle levels of identification. And I don't know that there's actually ever any end to that. There might be, but I don't know about it, because I'm somewhere, and I don't know whether I'm in Feta 1 or Feta 8 or what, it doesn't matter. The Feta concept is useful if you want to go looking at stuff. It looks at more and more subtle levels of identification. Right. So you appear to have an expectation that there's some end point where it won't happen anymore.
No,
Well, there may be, but I don't know about that.
I disagree that
Yeah,
that's my.
yeah, for sure. You're allowed to disagree.
Yeah, no. I'm just moving. I don't know. I
Right.
have no idea where the end point is for me. I just know this is what I'm doing, and this is what I need to be doing. It's what I want to be. It's like this is.
Okay, so maybe it's relevant for you to rest at that staging point, to look at. So we rest as that something that Rupert talks about, awareness or whatever, that the seabed, as Paul was putting it, or whatever. We rest there and look back at what happens as a way of trying to understand it. That's a trap. And trying to understand it is a trap. Looking at what happens, that's where the value is. So
looking at what happens. So I'm interested in what you're saying. That's a trap. And so I can see how, because I am trying to understand. I mean, who am I? What am I? What
you will
am I?
never understand that. That's
But
beyond your ability to understand that.
okay, but is there a appropriate, or is there, like, do you have to just throw yourself into the void
Can you do
right
that?
off the bat? I don't think so.
Can you do
Well-
that? If you wanted to, could you do it? I don't think
I don't think so.
so. It'll happen
Maureen,
or it won't happen. So, sorry, go on, Al.
I was just going to say, Maureen, if you go back and have a look at this conversation, you started off by saying that sometimes I can connect to something. There's a belief right there that offers you an opportunity to really find out what's happening when you believe you're connecting to something. What is it that you're connecting to, and what is it that you believe you're connecting from? In your own experience, I don't want necessarily an answer, but really investigate that.
I think if I use the word connect, which I'm sure I did, it's not accurate.
Well, that's the point. That's the point. Our language often betrays what we truly believe. We don't think we're believing it, but that's actually something that we do believe.
Okay, so you're saying that because that's the word I used, that there
Yes.
is something there for me to look at in terms of what I said. Am I feeling that there is this separate something, this something that's not me,
Mhm.
that I'm feeling that I'm able to connect to. Is that,
Yes,
which is
that's it.
different than what Vince is saying, which is that is the truth of it that it's what's left when everything else gets removed.
That's what I'm pointing to. Yeah.
Okay.
You hit on something that I think is valuable too, and it's certainly something that I use in my experience. So I just said I use in my experience. Now, the moment I reflect on what I said, I ask myself, do I really mean my experience? Do I really believe that? Or is it just words that are coming up? Now, I can fool myself and say it's just words, or they can actually be just words for the sake of communication. So that investigation is that question into that. So in this case, I would say the answer that comes to me is that I'm just communicating with you, and that's no better way to communicate than that. So I say my experience. But there are times when I say, I don't know, an example, I'm hungry, and it comes out spontaneously, and with it is a certain sensation, a subtle feeling that tells me that I'm identifying with being hungry. There's an identification going on. And so that for me is where the juice is to work with. That gives me something to look at. And now I feel like I'm just rambling because I don't know what I'll point out.
How do you look at that?
Well, for me, I could use the Feder model as a way of investigating it, but I generally don't. For me, it's just a recognition that there is some identification, and that recognition that there is some identification there is enough. I'm quite happy with not stopping at the recognition, but not going further than recognizing that I identified under those circumstances. And it's because I have a story that says that recognition is enough to help dissolve it. And it may not be totally dissolved at that moment, but it's a step in that direction.
So are you saying it's not that you will never say I'm hungry again? It's the feeling you had associated with it that you are pointing at?
The identification, yes. And that feeling is what tells me whether there's identification or whether I'm just using it as a communication tool.
So Maureen, that gives us another very potent aspect to finding what's happening. Be very careful that you're not going back to your head to try and figure this out as you investigate this. That'll be a default reaction. Feel into what's been felt as you take those questions in. Never look to the mind for an answer.
Yeah, that's a big one. The mind will lie 100% of the time. The body never lies. Now, that's not accurate either, but it's another good staging point. Yeah.
So one thing I do notice, I don't come up with I'm hungry, but I might get the urge to get up and get something to eat. And what I notice, because it's just something that I'm not hungry, that I don't really want something to eat, that something is going on in that moment that I'm reacting to.
Yeah.
But so is identification like
it is
part of that?
Well, it is and it isn't. Yes, but you're really onto something really, really potent here. That brilliance is that you recognize that something other than actual hunger, right? And what it is that we are constantly diverting away from unpleasant sensation. Now,
Mhm.
those unpleasant sensations, and here we do a really deep dive. So we're getting, this is getting into FETA 4 and 5 stuff. Here we do a really deep dive where we have become conditioned, very likely at a very early age, even a pre-verbal age, we've become conditioned to respond to certain triggers, and those triggers were responding to trauma is a word that comes to mind, but not in a classic term. A hungry baby is experiencing trauma, because until they get satisfied. So we're experiencing something, and what happened is that our bodies remember it, even though our mind doesn't, even though it was before so long ago that we don't remember it, but our body still does. And the current circumstances have triggered a cellular memory of that situation. And by getting up to get something to eat, or we are diverting away from that unpleasant sensation that comes.
Right, I
So
understand.
this is deep stuff, yeah.
I mean, and that I've gotten really good at.
Yeah,
which is-
well, we all do, because we've had a lifetime of doing it. Right?
I'm certainly good at diverting, but in terms of food now, that's something I recognize almost 100%, and I just don't. I don't even get it at the chair. It doesn't get very far.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I don't then do anything with that.
Yes,
I
yes.
don't then. So what is the looking that I
So
like?
that's the deep dive that you will do at that point. Now, once again, you don't have to be able to define it. You don't have to know what the particular thing was that was there. So this is where what I was saying was the recognizing that I'm identifying is the same thing. You recognize there's something there that's impelling you to do that. And as a result, you can not do it, so to speak. Now, that recognizing that something is there, I say, and others will disagree with me, but I say that's enough for you to start taking the power out of that, start dejuicing it, if you like.
Well, I can see that I have done that, because it's quite remarkable for me, because to be and I have never looked into it. I've never turned back to say, okay, what was I just thinking about? That was, I don't even know what I was thinking about.
Yeah, of course, that's right. You don't, and you don't need to know. There are some value in knowing, perhaps, in tracking it down, but the noticing now. The next question is it diminishing as a behavior? If it continues to always be there and be just as strong, then it's worth going down to the next step, going a bit deeper. But if as a result of noticing it, it happens less and less, then that's enough. You're doing so well. So it's again a case of being honest with yourself about what the trend is, which of course relies on memory and its thoughts again and so on. So you got always be careful here, because we fool ourselves. We just lie to ourselves. Our mind does. It lies to us constantly about things because it's always trying to make us feel good. That's part of what it sees its job as.
Right.
And it's interesting too. So the idea of getting up and going to the fridge or going for some food, that's a pretty gross kind of example of diverting. But thoughts can be what we use to divert as well. Just thoughts, or let's watch something on television, or let's do something, do anything, any activity can be a diversion as well. Yeah.
Right.
So simply staying with it and not see. And another one that comes up here is doing. You know, doing is like doing rests on a delusion of having control, being able to make choices, and all of that. They're all delusions that we will learn to recognize. That we will recognize as we confront them, right? So really, in a way, you're helpless. All you can do is receive whatever pops up. But that's not quite right either. So, you know, we're not a victim to what arises, because we're the ones that create that arising. But we don't do it consciously, and we don't do it willfully.
Mm.
So it's really valuable to be passive is not the right word, but to surrender, to accept what arises, as always be inviting to what arises, because it's always there for your benefit, kind of thing. Yeah. See, so forget the words I'm saying. Can you get the flavor of what I'm saying? Yeah.
Mhm.
Be
I
gentle
can.
with yourself. Be really gentle with yourself if you can do that. Of course you can't, but the words might make it possible. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Thanks.
don't drive yourself crazy looking to understand anything. That's just another diversion.
Mm. Well, thank you very much. Thanks everyone for your time and input. I
Thank you for bringing that up. That you will find lots of people will identify and get value out of what you brought up. That's great. Good stuff. Thank you.
Sorry to jump in, but there's something I need to check. Brian,
Sorry.
have you just got bad indigestion, or are you okay?
No, I'm good. I'm just letting my body do what it wants to do, which seems to be feeling something, and it wants to move around. Something about it feels a little bit soapy or like maybe pretentious, but I don't know. There's something in there that's just like, yeah, I don't know.
Great, as long as you're well. That was my concern.
Yeah. Well, thanks for checking it. I do have a question though, which is actually like this like sensation, like I feel it deep in the belly and it feels like a trauma. And I feel like with my mother, I had a conversation with my mother and she was telling me what to do. And there was just this reaction of like just rage. And I didn't speak it out, but I felt it and I voiced it to her. I was like, I'm feeling rage with you right now, and I just feel guilt and shame. And it perpetuated for a few days, but it's almost like the sensation sometimes can just feel like peace. And it's the same sensation in a sense. And then sometimes it's abandonment or something else. And I'm like, am I making this up? This like abandonment thought and story and sensation, and then perpetuating it by being like, oh, I'm feeling the sensation, and like, but like it's, I don't know, maybe this is just self-judgment or criticism, or I don't know. So I would love some clarity on that, possibly.
Keep going, James.
Well, okay, I'll keep going. If I'm answering it from the perspective of this forum, I'm saying, yes, you're making it up, because we're all making everything up, yeah? But it's how what we make up affects us. And this seems to be having quite an impact on you. So I don't know if that helps, but can you think of any way that you can sort of ease the impact or see it in a different way?
Yeah, it's like acceptance, or just, when I change the story, when the story is just different and it's like, oh, I'm okay, this is okay. Well, what I'm feeling with the sensation is like, what it really just wants is to be loved. So that might be why it's acting out like the movements, or
So you jump in here, James, and you say, don't worry about
Do
what,
I jump?
why. Yeah, just get in touch with that feeling that you want. What you might want is, where is that sensation? That's what you say,
yeah.
James.
Go for it, Brian. Go on.
Well, it's deep in the belly. It feels like the horror in the gut. And it seemed to, it made me sick for a few weeks, seemingly. And I don't know, but I have this tendency to come up with stories and over dramatize things and make myself into a victim in that story. And then, get other people involved in it or something to make it more real, or so I'm just very wary of that part, but it does feel like really tender and childlike and stuff like that.
Okay, so coming to right
And
here and now, yeah, this moment where that you're sharing with the rest of us, what's going on right now in the body?
yeah, it's just what feels like tenderness in the belly. It's just yeah, just like an ache, like an ache in the belly, really. But like tender, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing.
So describe that
And
ache.
it just feels like really sensitive, and just kind of like electric, or it just feels like a low hum that's just constantly there.
Right.
Yeah, and it
Would
feels
would you say that that's there even when you're not aware of it? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
no.
No, you thought about that, I think. So when you're describing that, is that low hum, that ache? When you say ache, I got the impression that it was like a vacuum that wants to suck something in.
Yeah. That does feel accurate. Yeah. Um, yeah. Yeah, it does feel like a vacuum.
And it sounds a little bit like a background thing that's kind of behind everything always. But this is my imagination. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like something that yeah, wants to pull me in, or
So if it had a voice, and it was, and it would, let's imagine that it had has a voice, and it is speaking through a megaphone, one of those old kind of tube things that magnify the sound, and it's going to say something to the world. What's the first thing that comes to mind that it wants to shout out to the world?
it felt like I can't.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah. So it feels a bit impotent.
Yeah. It's like helpless.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Baby-like.
it's just like, yeah, baby like, for sure. Yeah.
innocent?
I feel like the judgment on it, it's like bad. Oh, it's bad or something,
That's from you from the
but it
outside
is innocent.
looking at it. Yeah.
It is innocent. I mean, it can't help.
It
That,
can't
yeah,
help but being what it is. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And then
So,
like, it can't help itself.
yep. And so if let's have a fantasy that a genie can poof something into it that satisfies it, that fills it, that makes it complete. What would that be? What is it that it wants? First thing that comes to mind. Don't think about it. Just
Yeah, it's just a love,
love.
acceptance,
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
like being held like by its mother or something. Yeah,
Yes. Okay.
for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And earlier you talked about rage towards your mother. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was really intense. It was just like yeah, it was just like she brought up this like really primal rage, like, and it's happened so many times
Yep.
before. Like I've had this rage towards her, and it's just like I would never act it out,
Of
but it's
course.
like I want to kill her.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
could you see, like in terms of what we were talking about with Maureen earlier, that this very likely has come from a really, really early age, and the way that you perceived things as an infant, that innocent, naive desire for contact and love and touch and warmth and all of that stuff was somehow not satisfied as an infant. And so it became a conditioned reflex in you. And even though now as an adult you see it as inappropriate to act it out, it's still there. Yeah.
yeah,
Now I wonder whether we need to do anything more than recognize its existence. Now,
yeah,
if you do, it may be very appropriate for you to seek out a psychologist and have a few sessions to look at that, depending on just how some part of you will know whether that's appropriate or not. Is that something you've done in the past?
yeah. I mean, I've sat with different, therapists and stuff like that. It's been the suggestion for a long time from Lisa Cairns. Like I kept talking to her, and she was like, "You need to, get therapy," and there was resistance to it. And also, I can't remember what I was gonna say. Yeah. But yeah, and I'm out of money somehow right now. But there's also this avoidant personality that plays here. It actually avoids touch and contact and engagement and
Yeah, of course. You know why?
yeah.
Can you see why?
So it feels unsafe,
Yep.
but
Yep.
it will be abandoned. Yeah.
It lets the cat out of the bag, so to speak, if you go there. Yeah, that I can fully understand that one. Yeah. Okay. Right.
But
Okay.
yeah, I could use that probably. I've sat with a lot of teachers and pseudo therapists and therapists, but
Brian, there's
yeah,
something
yeah.
there's something that comes here that you said a couple of things that I think subtle but very potent potentially. Earlier on, you talked about feeling peace, but then a sense of abandonment was also felt. Those
Yeah,
two.
it's like no, go on.
It seemed to me the way you described it that both were there together.
Yeah, I mean, this sensation, it also just feels like it's also just restfulness sometimes.
Right.
Maybe it's
Right.
like something sees it as home or something, as
Mhm.
like this abandonment, like the sensation is familiar, or I don't know.
Right. And then later on, you talked about loving it. And Vince has just been highlighting this sense of innocence and other aspects that are very well associated with love, for want of a better word. And also I sense that this has been going on for some time.
Yeah, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure.
You know,
Yeah, this has created problems in my life for sure.
yeah. And if I say this, how does this feel? That this is changing and love and peace are more apparent as you're experiencing the original sensation of rage.
Yeah, during the rage, the love wasn't like so apparent, but I didn't act it out, and I sat with it long enough that it just turned to the abandonment again, and then sat with the
Right.
abandonment. It just feels like a bottomless pit is the thing. Like
It
I can
does.
feel it.
Yeah.
It doesn't like release or let go or something.
Indeed. But there is a real change here that can't be denied, can it?
Yeah, it does change. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not
that,
consistent.
right. And that's a beautiful place to be, just to let that continue to unfold. I sense with the experience of rage that you were talking about with your mother, yes, it did take hold, but it didn't take you away for days like it might have in the past.
No. It was surprising though that it took up like, 2 days, 3 days or something, that I was
Right.
just that the hatred was coming up, and then I had to do some stuff to release and sit with it and allow things up. But
But
yeah.
there's that capacity to allow that to unfold within yourself is what I'm really hearing at this point, even though it's tough at times. There is that capacity to let it unfold.
Yeah, for sure. That was something that was much harsher in the past.
Right.
It wasn't as easy to let it just unfold and be with it.
This is beautiful. That's all we need to do. Just let that, because as Vince says, this is going so deep. And personally here, I had something that I was dealing with, and it took years. I didn't realize what was happening like we do now, but just staying with it as you are, there's a sense here of healing that's really being felt in what's happening for you.
Yeah, it's just, there have been stories about it because it's ruled my life for so long, and yeah, I ended up with female teachers a lot and stuff like that, and there was that seeking for the mother, obviously, and this upset of not having been able to like resolve it, and being told by a lot of teachers like maybe non-duality, you can't wake up, or because there's some deep trauma there and you're going to keep cycling around, and I did keep cycling around and around, and it was just yeah, that itself was like traumatizing to repeatedly go through, just going back into the trauma and just the helplessness of that alone, probably.
But and the way that you've reported this sense of peace and love, even though the other is there and very very raw, the way you've reported that, the love and the peace that you're looking for is there, and it's arising of its own accord in its own good time. So just be with it. Just be with it, really.
I'd like to just jump in here and say and remind everybody that when things come up, when shit arises, our human nature is to tell us that we've gone backwards, but we haven't. We never can go backwards. So if we've experienced say some relief from whatever, and then it appears, it's not the old stuff. It's new stuff that's come up, right? So it's always moving forward. So the more we uncover stuff, the easier it is for it to come up, and it can come up more intensely even. But it's important to appreciate that it's a new opportunity. It's not the old stuff. We haven't gone backwards. We haven't lost anything. It's always forward, always forward, always forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Brian, can I have
just to
some-
say,
Sorry, go on.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've been going through some similar, I don't think it's as intense as what you're going through, but going through some similar stuff, like energetically. And it always seems to be in a very similar place, and it's kind of there all the time, like you're saying. And so what I started doing originally was really going into it. I'm quite aggressive. I think that, I don't know where it comes from. I think it's like a bloke thing, I'm not sure, but it was kind of like, right, I'm going to go at this thing until it disappears. Basically, I want to get rid of it, was kind of the mindset. And so I kind of like go into it, and then that's for me when the kind of the twitching started. It's like when you really go at it, when you put your attention right into it, that's when kind of all the twitching starts. And I thought that was like, I was like, that's it, I'm doing the right thing, I'm getting in there, I'm like getting rid of this thing. But actually, I think that was the wrong way to go about it. I think with wounds like this, with deep stuff like this, I think being more gentle is definitely the better approach. And it's more like recognizing it's like, this is here, but this isn't everything that's here. You know, this is here, but it's contained. It's part of a much bigger thing, you know, and kind of holding it rather than trying to get into it, but really holding it, for me, felt like a kind of a gentler way of kind of being with it. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah,
That's a great point, Tom.
yeah,
That's
thank
really
you for
good.
that.
You're never
Yeah.
going to get anywhere by running away from this stuff. It'll chase you wherever you go. It's like your shadow.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why they call it shadow work. I don't know. But facing it is really important. But having the idea that you're going to get rid of it and having an end result, that's counterproductive. That won't. That doesn't
Yeah.
work. Yeah. So
Yeah, it's
facing
like
it and
nature.
embracing it. That's the go.
Holding it.
Yeah. Holding it,
Yeah.
loving it, welcoming it. It's an opportunity. That's good stuff. Yeah.
And just
Yeah,
just on
Yeah.
that point, Brian, sorry, I'm interrupting, but you know, sometimes
No,
again, we were talking about discounting last week. We discount the peace and the love because the other stuff seems so dramatic and so intense sometimes, but just acknowledging that every moment is part of this gentle healing that I think Tom's pointing to.
Yeah, and you know, in the past I might have been consumed by this and gone into stories and made it much worse, but it's actually totally fine now. It's not like a problem. It's only the story of like, oh, this ruined my life and I need to do that's terrible. But but yeah, when it's just felt, it can be really peaceful and it's okay. And yeah, by the way, if anybody knows somebody, a therapist or someone I can sit with, or is themselves someone I can sit with, then let me know. I'm open to, you know,
I had
I'm
a
open to
really
whatever.
good IFS therapist, actually, Brian, that I could recommend to you. So I'll send you some details later.
Okay, perfect. I appreciate it. Yeah,
Good stuff.
yeah.
Leonard,
it.
I would love to hear from you.
From me?
Yes, from you.
Yeah, it's the first time today that I'm here. What do you want to know from me? What do you want to hear?
What in from the perspective of this story, this stuff that we're talking about, where are you up to? Have you recognized yet that self is only a concept?
Yes, but yeah, as many others, I think I still get caught in the identification with thoughts, but usually it doesn't take me a lot of time to recognize it. So yeah, but then there are still some aspects about daily life that it's a bit difficult for me to distinguish, for example. At the moment, yeah, I should say like 3 years ago, I started to have a sober life because before my form of diverting was like taking a lot of drugs and alcohol and cigarettes and stuff like that. But also I would say I was kind of addicted to traveling, to get stimulation from outside all the time, going to parties, having love affairs, things like that. And then at some point I escaped to Argentina and it was kind of a way to to believe that I would leave all my problems behind in Berlin, but then somehow this new place and a different culture maybe also made it possible for me to I don't know, to quit with alcohol and all the other things, because I was outside of my usual circle of friends and so on. But I isolated myself a lot, and I think like the last 3 years, I have not been so much in contact with people in general. I think at the moment I'm kind of coming out of my of my capsule. So yeah, but of course this is also a story. I'm aware of that. At the moment I'm working a lot. I mean, I went back to Germany and then I had to get into the health system again, and now I'm employed, but actually I'm working a lot. So it's also interesting for me because then I kind of found out that before I was kind of avoiding situations that were not pleasant, and now I'm working a lot and it's not pleasant for me, but I started not to identify with my work and so somehow it just happens. It feels like it's just happening and it's not really tiring. So that's kind of a side effect that is quite astonishing for me. But on the other hand, for example, my body clearly says that it's too much, that it's not what it's a clear body no, I would say. So for example, yeah, I sometimes I find myself thinking about, should I change this? Should I quit working so much? And then I'm not quite sure if it's necessary to take a decision or it will just happen at some point, because I don't know, energetically, I won't be able to continue like that, but yeah.
So why are you here?
Yeah, I'm here because I don't really know where I am at the moment, or I don't really know either if it's really the right question to ask myself where I am. But I do see a lot of significant changes, but I would like to have an exchange with other people just to understand more about how it feels for everybody else. And and also because sometimes I'm not quite sure if if my understanding is rather still intellectual and not so much intuitive.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't
Not that one, yeah. Well, I'm going to let somebody else take this one. I'm going to the toilet. So, somebody jump in. Yeah, that last sentence was the telling one for me. Yeah.
I can briefly share. So it's impossible to directly compare subjective experiences, unfortunately. So there's no way of knowing if this is similar to what you're experiencing. I, for a long, long time, was trapped in intellectual understanding, and I suspected that, but I also intellectualized it so much that I thought like, okay, no, maybe this really, really is it. And I'm certainly not completely seen through everything, but just quite recently, after order of magnitude years, started to have some experiential insights, or insights. I don't like that word, it's a bit pretentious, but experiences that immediately are contrasting to the intellectualization, which is not at all to say that that's not what you're having. No way for me to know. But for a while I was stuck there. And I'm not, again, all the way through, but now it is clear that that was for me intellectualizing.
I realized that I had identified with the idea of there not being a self when I felt like I had to defend the position of there not being a self to people that were talking about themselves. And then that's when I realized it was an idea. That's because I felt personally attacked by the fact that people thought that they had selves. And I was like, yeah, okay. Now I've made that into an idea that I have to defend, So that was a sign for me. I don't know if that'll help, but.
Casimir, you talked about things that have brought about it just a different, well, it's more than experience. You mentioned that there's some experiences that have happened. Could you relate a couple of those for us?
Sure. Trying to put into my own words, probably the most recent one has been the most potent, maybe a couple of weeks ago. So I've been having headlessness glimpses, but this most recent one, it only lasted a few seconds, but the best way I can describe it in my words is that I completely disappeared, but experience remained, which if I'd tried to imagine in any form of intellectualizing or conceptually before what that means, it wouldn't have computed. But, literally subjective experience, like visual appearance, was still there. Thoughts were still there. Everything was still there. Everything was still happening. But there was no observer. And so therefore, clearly, the observer is not necessary. An experiencer is not necessary for experience, which almost sounds like an internal contradiction when I try to put it into words. It was, it's not even that I was a passive observer of things. Experience was just self-aware or self-knowing, and that's all that there was. And by experience, I mean physical sensations, thoughts, sights, sounds, that kind of thing. And so there was nothing for me to do, or there was no doer. Things were just happening, which feel free to tell me that if this is a incorrect experience or misinterpretation. I want to know things truthfully, so I'm not sensitive about being told that, oh, I confused myself. But that was totally different from a conceptual understanding. And so now I feel like since then, I've not had that level of clarity, but things have been kind of falling apart a little bit. I'm kind of pulling down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, so that glimpse, as you call it, gave you reassurance, for want of a better word, and now that that's not there, it doesn't appear that you're doubting it at all.
Well, it's in part because I'm not completely back to where I was. I'm sort of halfway. So right now there's a strong headlessness sense of, yeah, it doesn't feel like there's physically anything here. I mean, obviously I can touch my face and I know it, there are physical sensations, but it more just feels like there is only the world. But what has returned that dropped completely during that glimpse is a sense of doership, even if it's not clearly this here.
Right.
And so, but the fact that it's sort of halfway, gives me strong confidence that it wasn't just some incorrect memory or some adrenaline spike that got saved to memory incorrectly. Like there's something persistent that I can see right now that's not nearly as clear, but that's non-conceptual in the sense of I don't arrive to it through logic or through understanding. It's something that I can empirically investigate in experience from which to draw concepts and understanding if I choose to, but I don't need to. It's just, yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a real curiosity rather than a seeking for it. Or is there still a seeking for it?
This has catalyzed an intense curiosity, potentially a bit to the detriment of, it's been a little bit of an obsession lately, and I've been neglecting some other things more than I should be, but so far nothing bad has happened.
Right, beautiful, beautiful. And just this issue of getting back to where you were, if the truth was you'll never get back to that, it'll be, you're comfortable with that?
Yeah, I mean, saying getting back to that, that's sort of just a figure of speech, I guess.
Right.
It's more that I would like to be able to see with that level of clarity now. And so now there's still the belief conceptually that there is no doer, but it's not something that is clearly seen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you're contented just to let that unfold as you continue to look?
I mean, it's on some level, like I don't have a choice in the matter. I don't know. It's attention just keeps getting brought back to this. Thoughts are sort of less and less interesting. The thing that is of any concern right now, and sorry, I don't mean to commandeer the conversation, is oscillating back and forth essentially between trusting it versus not trusting it, in the sense of when attention gets pulled completely into this, things are just happening and it's great, it's spontaneous, free, whatever. But then thoughts can arise of wait, we can't just let go. You know, what is this? We don't know what it's doing, what it's trusting. Like we have bills to pay, we have to do this, we have to do that. And I suspect that given enough time, it'll just slowly become apparent that it's okay. And you know, logic, conceptually, not experience, but conceptually, I now believe, you know, well, those thoughts don't have any power anyway. They never did. But that conceptual understanding does not depower them at all. The only thing that does is when attention comes back to the non-conceptual presence that's not the thoughts.
So every time those thoughts take you away, when you see it, when you come back, as Vince says, just laugh at it.
Yeah, it's funny. More and more, I'm learning that you know, initially the thoughts would arise, and I would try to negate them logically or with an argument using other thoughts, and then not through any deliberate effort, just attention on its own started instead just coming back to the presence, and that didn't logically negate the thoughts, but then it would just it did, the thoughts didn't matter. And so that's now the habit that seems to be reinforcing itself or training itself. And so for the most part, I'm kind of just letting that happen.
Beautiful.
But I'm very open to being told that I should be doing something differently, or I'm confusing myself, or, you know, I don't want to be tricking myself or fooling myself.
Beautiful. That openness to the fact that you might be fooling yourself, I think it's just part of the thirst for truth, or the love of truth, that is so beautiful. So Leonard, I'm interested what's happening for you as you hear Casimir talking. What's your response there?
Yeah, for example, when I did this program with my guide on Liberation Unleashed, it was kind of the first time that I could really experience things not intellectually, But
Mhm.
on the other hand, sometimes thoughts also came in to interpret it. So it was kind of mixed up, and I could not clearly say afterwards if it was really experienced directly or an imagination of direct experience, if that makes sense. So sometimes I'm a bit confused about that. Also, for example, yeah, I'm still practicing, so to say. For example, last week I had kind of a stressful situation, and it was kind of the first time that I really tried to locate what was happening in the body, and it was the first time that I could really experience that the feeling dissolved. It was not such a big issue. It was nothing like a childhood trauma or something like that. It was just like I was on a plane and I didn't know if I would get my connection flight and so on. And then I had a cold and a temperature, and then the fantasy was like I'm going to strand at some airport with a fever and not knowing how to continue my travel, and that would have been usually a situation that would had led to overthinking and imagining catastrophic situations and stuff like that. And it was really the first time I could experience it to function. I mean, like to dissolve or to cut this. I wouldn't even say cut the thoughts. It was just like concentrating on how does it feel in the body, and is it staying always at the same part of my body, or is it moving, or is it always the same intensity? And then this really, I had to repeat this several times, but it was really like my first experience about this feeling into the sensation in the body.
Beautiful. And this may seem a bit of a strange question, but how did it feel to feel that? You said this is the first time you felt the direct experience of feeling. What was the deep feeling about that experience, about that feeling?
I was really calm. I mean, it was kind of a stressful situation, but also, it felt like not identifying with, for example, the cold or the temperature or like the weakness I felt. And also I was kind of sure that no matter what would happen, it would just be fine. I mean,
right.
And I usually my former personality, to put it like that, is not like that. I mean, I would rather like imagine horrible situations and overthink everything. So,
so did that feel true, or did it feel like it was intellectual?
No, it felt true.
There we go. There's a beautiful unfolding. Just let that continue to unfold.
Yeah, I think it's just very new to me. So I'm still curious to know if that's just imagination or if, but no, anyway, actually, I don't think so.
It's interesting, this question. It's interesting, this question coming in as this imagination, but just a few seconds ago, you said, no, it felt true. It felt true. So stay with that felt knowing. Don't
maybe
go to
that's
the Mhm.
like I'm still doubting sometimes. Yeah.
Mhm. So
Well,
that felt knowing that body telling you,
Mm.
just stay with that.
if you start thinking about it, don't believe it. Doubts are thoughts, and the way out of thoughts is always go back to the body. Yeah. Anna wants to say something.
Yes, I just think that's maybe not to that degree as Casimir has described, but there was, it wasn't the first time, but it happened like a few years before, but I started happened again. A glimpse, like, say, like I was walking, in the forest today, and at some stage, I just felt like orientation was gone. You know, it's just like a mental map switched off. Like you don't know who you are, where you are, what is happening, how it's happening. All what you see, just like body navigating itself, and it's, you know, like, and it's just like clear knowing that navigation is exactly how it has to be. But then, you know, like I could say mind is just getting agitated, unsettled, and that me was back in the driver's seat again, and like all is kind of normal. And then I came back home and I was standing at the window, standing there eating, and next thing it just could, the best way I could say, like self was dissolving, and next thing thought, no, it can't happen yet. And since that time, all day today, it's just like it's just like thoughts. They just hear thoughts just happening. There's thoughts, that's thoughts, and like that's how, like, but self never been here, so that's can be different because it's just the way it's happening. Self never been here, so it's not like there has to be some big expectations of something is going to change massively, drastically. It's just noticing them thoughts and just like chatter never stops. So yeah, something like that happened today.
Mm.
And it's kind of, I don't know, like importance of whatever happening. It's also happening, doesn't happen. It's like, you know, self disappears. Okay, like you eat something, that's the same thing. Self is here. That's, you watch TV, there's like no differentiation. Like if used to be, oh yes, I'm getting somewhere, I'm achieving somewhere, I'm nearly there, yeah. Now it's just like whatever. No, there is no even whatever, there is no verbalizing. It's just neutral. Nothing is moving.
Yeah.
No celebration is happening. That type of way.
Yeah. Okay, Anna, that you triggered something for me, and I had an experience yesterday that may be very much like what you just described when you said the body appeared to be dissolving. That was very much what I experienced yesterday. I'll send you a link to that video because it won't be published for a little while. It's with Panilla, but it was brilliant stuff. Yeah. So anyway, what comes to mind is if it's anything like what I experienced, it's how can I put it? It's way beyond the Feta One stuff. It's not about self anymore. It's about cellular identification of self. It's something. It's deep stuff. Okay. So yeah, just be curious and gentle with it. Yeah. So it's almost like you can expect surreal experiences to happen. As you know, I think, and it's intellectualizing again, philosophizing a bit, but I think we give ourselves tangibility with our thoughts, and when we are no longer a slave to our thoughts, we start to become less tangible, insubstantial. That's, I think maybe you were having a physical experience of that. And maybe, I don't know.
Like even some like mind wants to put that, yes, but I'm doing, and that's like instantly recognize that's another thought. So, or like, yes, I will go and I will do, and like, but that's thought.
And what happens when that's not there anymore? That's all of a sudden we've got no legs to stand on. Yeah.
Like, it's not like I did something to make it happen. It just happens itself. It comes, goes, and it's like independently. There is no on-off button. Whatever happens, that happens. Also, another thing, we were walking with friends, and at some stage they start to talk something about politics and things like this, which are normally not interested, and they can see that resistance and raising up, and then like saying, oh, but people are allowed to talk whatever they want to talk, and there is no difference. Are they talking about politics, or are they talking about flying spaghetti monsters? It's about nothing anyway. And next thing it just released like this, and you walk in the pace again.
Yeah, beautiful. It is beautiful. Those realizations, yeah. And after a while, that becomes normal. It's ceases to be a wonder, yeah.
Yeah, there is no that grasping on the, wow, look at me. That is gone. That is gone. There is no expectation something to happen. Like, it's just,
yeah.
As much as you have in cup of tea, there's no difference. It's just another experience, basically. Yeah, that's what it is. Just another experience, and no difference.
So what I was talking about, though, wasn't just getting over the wow, there's no me, but getting over the wow, there's no that. That the looking outward wow becomes normal as well. Yeah.
It's all part of a dismantling process, is it? It's another way to describe it.
Yes, it really feels like that. It's like bit by bit by bit. But what I have noticed, there is normally some kind of shadow material getting lifted and worked through. Yeah. Then there is kind of settling down and something getting shifted again. Yeah. Then there is a wee bit of peace, and some shadow material comes up, getting processed, released, settles down, some kind of shift. Yeah, that's something like this.
Oh, you've got a problem, Anna. It's I'm joking, obviously, but it is. It's this, we think this letting go. It just happens when we see what is. That which is so subtle, we overlook it because it's not something, or it's not experience.
And that is that. If I understand you right, that is here. That's
absolutely.
Let's call it presence.
Present. Yeah,
that's like
we got to put some label on it to communicate.
Yeah, like if you can't put any label on it. That's just impossible. But let's call it, for a communication purpose, like a presence. You can't get away from it. You
Yeah.
can't lose it. You can't find it because you can't lose it. Like it's impossible to get away from it.
Absolutely.
So even and this is jumping ahead maybe a bit, but even the idea that we talk about here and now, but they're also just staging points. So we say we're it's more accurate to say not to say that what is here is, it's more accurate to look at what's not actually here.
Mhm.
And that's everything. That's everything. So that you'll get to the point where there's nothing.
Mhm.
You know, here is not here. Now is not now. But they're good staging points. Yeah. Yeah. I want to hear from Tom. How are you going, Tom?
Yeah, I'm pretty good, thanks, man. I'm trying to avoid intellectualizing. But then I know last time we spoke, you said kind of have a look at the fetters. But I'm kind of avoiding looking at the fetters because I'm worried that I'm going to intellectualize the whole process. So I guess I just kind of appreciate some guidance. Do you think it's worth getting involved with all of the fetters and trying to work it all out and kind of going through them linearly and doing it all and kind of releasing them the way through? Or is it better just to kind of explore and be curious and just see what's here and not worry too much about them?
I would highly suggest to look up Pernella's stuff. Very good content.
Yeah, she is brilliant. But what came up for me as an answer to that question is you're lost in the idea of control and doing and making choices and decisions. That's a joke. Okay. What will happen is what will happen is what will happen is what will happen. It'll just come up or not. You don't have to make a decision about go that way or not go that way. Can you grok that? I'm seeing you nodding. I think you do.
Yeah, it's interesting because I am aware of the fact that I'm not making decisions.
Mm.
But my mind really won't let it go. It's like, yeah, but I am really, actually I'm the one deciding these things. So I do need to have a think about this. So I don't know. Can I let it go? If I let it go, will I do anything?
One way to look at it is like, how did you end up here? You could say, well, life did it, didn't it? It just happened. Here you are, and you heard the word fetters. So, well, that's something, isn't it? Are you curious? Well, if you are, yeah, you'll look into it a little. If you're not, you won't. Or you might look into it and decide it's a waste of time or not for you or whatever. Who knows? Just be relaxed and go with the flow, so to speak. Yeah. And then and also with the fetter stuff, I mean, there's a few people that I would recommend as good people, and they all come at it from different angles. Right? So if you look at Christiana or Angelo, they tend to work through these things in a linear fashion. I heard you say that word. Whereas if you go and look at what Pernella's saying, and I do recommend that, that's good value. There's a bit of linearity, but not much, So it is valuable to consider that the first 5 fetters, which are looking through self, doubt, then rites and rituals. That's a good one because that's a little bit tricky, rites and rituals. And then desire and aversion. Those ones, you kind of need to get them out of the road, mostly at least, before you get on to the second 5, because the second 5 are really, really subtle stuff. They're really much more subtle than the first ones are pretty. The word gross comes to mind, but it's not quite right. They're much more apparent. They're much more tangible, if you like. So, once you get into the later ones, they're more subtle. So if you find yourself in a situation where you go, yeah, I know there's stuff going on, but I don't know what it is. And maybe the fetters are a good way to find out what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what will happen is what will happen. You don't have to make any decision about that. Kick back and relax. Enjoy the ride.
That's been a theme for me is the relaxation and really trying to trust, because at the core, I feel quite unsafe. Being this idea of me feels unsafe quite a lot of the time for whatever reason, and trusting that I can just relax. That's a real process.
But I heard you trying to trust, and that again, efforting is not going to get you anywhere except up against a brick wall. Efforting is all about resisting. It's just a tricky way to not do something. Yeah.
This issue of intellectualization with the fetters, it's fascinating, because I think there is that potential. But if you do find yourself intellectualizing, is that a problem? It's life perhaps showing you what's happening there. I've had a couple of situations where people have taken an interpretation as a diagnosis, for want of a better word, and they found themselves lost in thought as a result. And they said, the fetters are not working for me. It wasn't that the fetters weren't working as such. It was the way that they had reacted and found themselves lost in thought. And that was, for want of a better term, a really valuable experience to see what they'd done with what they'd experienced. So it wasn't that it was a problem. It was just another experience that helped them see what was really happening.
That's a good trick, that one too. One of the third fetter, rites and rituals, where it's really easy to see somebody's locked in rites and rituals if they're going to church in order to go to heaven or not go to hell. That's a really gross way of looking at it. But anything you do with a purpose, that's a trick, isn't it? Anything you do for an end, looking for an end result.
I recently realized, it was only a few days ago, but I was putting a lot of, coming to meetings like this. It's nice to come to meetings like this. It's good to see everyone, but kind of part of you comes to a meeting like this because you want to be enlightened, right? That's the really that's the subtle story that goes underneath it. It's like, yeah, it's nice to talk to people, but I'm pretty much hoping that Alan's going to say something to me and I'm just going to become enlightened right now. That's the hope. So
well, you might,
that belief was really getting me down, because there's this story about future enlightened Tom, who's not here right now, and obviously he doesn't exist and never will exist, so yeah, I see that one. And it can be really sneaky.
Well, I've got the opposite problem, Tom. I don't come to be enlightened. I come to see the darkness. That's my story. Someone might give me a poke and reveal that, oh, there's a bit of a problem.
Tom, you said that person who's enlightened isn't here, and that you're thinking about whether you should work with the fetters or not, yeah? That person who puts your glasses on in the morning, dresses you, cuts up your food and feeds you? Let him make the decisions, because he's here.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Is that what you do, James?
No, that's what I hope to do. I'd love to do that. But I keep getting in the way.
But you know that. So what's the problem?
I want to put a different perspective on it. I know what you're getting at, James. I know what you're saying, and I agree to a point. But I think if you look at things, what is actually happening, if Tom looks at the glasses getting put on, they don't get put on. Nobody puts them on. It just happens. It's almost like they float up by themselves and get on, but they don't even do that, because that means themselves are doing it, right? There is just this, like the glasses are not on and then the glasses are on. That's it.
What even are glasses?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just happened to Paul Simpson, actually. They came off and they went on.
So that's a subtle one, but it's a big one. You know, that's that doing illusion that's pretty well tied up with identification again. It's mind that comes in after the fact that always says, "Oh yes, I did that," right? But if you look at what actually happens when you walk across the room and you look back, you can say, "I did that," and that's okay at a communication level, at a normal social level. But if you look at what happened, you weren't even aware that you were walking across the room. Nobody did it. Walking across the room just happened. Well, walking across the room didn't even happen. Walking happened. Across the room is just an added story we add to it. Right? It's only afterwards that we can say, yes, you did that. Yeah. Yeah. So watching the food moving from the plate to the mouth, watching the mouth chew the food or swallowing the food, watching all of that stuff that happens. This is amazing stuff. If you can watch it without the stories that run along to it, you can just see these things doing themselves. Well, that's wrong to say. You can see these things happening. There is no force of intention happening to make it happen. There's no making it happen. It just happens. And it's like I'm a bit blown away. It's so obvious. How can you not see that? Right? Did you think I will sit on the chair and I will put my left arm in this position and I'll put my right arm in this position and I will scratch my face? You don't think about these things. They just happen. It's obvious. It's so obvious that everything just happens.
What comes up for me then though, Vince, is like, yeah, I didn't think about sitting on this chair, but I sometimes would consider what I might say before I say it. Or I would think about planning something in the
Okay,
future.
now that's fine. And your mind can tell you that they're connected, but are they? Right? You can consider for ages what you're going to say, and then out of your mouth comes something different or a slightly different version. Right? So considering what you're going to say happens and what you say happens. But are they connected? We think they are normally, but I can tell you they're not. They're two separate happenings. Isn't that also obvious?
I guess so.
Don't guess. Yes, just watch. Watch. Yeah.
May I try to add something very quickly? And as I said before, this is coming from someone who has very low confidence in having anything figured out. So if it doesn't make sense or doesn't help, please throw it out.
Stop explaining, apologizing. Just say.
Something that for me was very salient and important was being able to, and I have no idea what triggered this, recognize, I guess people call it awareness or things that's not thought. And why that was important is it gave a different perspective, literal perspective, from which to see everything. And in hindsight, I now see that all of the time before that, you know, if I'd heard what Vince just said, I would have said like, yes, I understand that, but I would have been seeing it from the perspective of thought. This might not be helpful at all. I don't know if it would have been to past me, but I can at least convey that there was a very not wishy-washy difference. Like it's very empirical, very concrete of either it's being seen by thought, or there's this other perspective that is always there, but thought cannot take that perspective because it isn't thought. And so the thinking mind will never get that perspective. That's fine. But this other perspective is the one from which, at least to me, it seems clearer that things just happen. But until I saw that there is this thing that is not thought, like literally is not thought, I would have just kept going in circles and circles and circles and like seeing things and yes, it's obvious and blah, 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 but that would have all been from the thinking perspective. Yeah,
that's a really good one, Casimir. Yeah, I love that. Now, I said, oh, just watch. And I'm kind of saying the same thing, but it's really easy to think about that or take that, see that with thoughts, and not actually do it. Of course, you can't do it. So again, language kills us every time, doesn't it? But yeah, that's a really big one. So the one technique that you might find happening is that when you just watch, ask your body if it's recognizing what's happening rather than think about it. Even though when you ask your body, you're using thoughts to do that, you're looking for physical response. So now this is another one that comes up often. A body yes is an opening, an expansion, a chest coming out, a nice that, and a body no is a contraction. Right. Now, of course, there are variations of that, but ask your body if you've seen something and just watch for the reaction. And if it contracts, you haven't. If it expands, you have. Opening. Yeah.
But it's like an energetic seeing.
Yes.
Isn't it? As opposed to like just looking or.
Yes, that's right. If it's seen with thoughts, it's superficial and it's obvious. There is no energy involved. It's almost a deflection. It probably is a deflection. I don't know.
Can I ask a question about the because it just occurs to me, and I mean this is something that's been going round and round for me for a very long time, is that I would say, and again, I might be wrong, and this may be coming from thought, but 9 times out of 10, if I think I'm going to do something, that is what happens, and that's the way it works out.
But not because.
I mean, obviously, sometimes, so the problem, it's so what's the word? Seductive, because. Yeah. If I say I'm going to go and make a cup of tea, then 9 times out of 10 I will, unless I sort of trip over or somebody rings at the, So yeah. I have seen my body just doing things without thoughts getting involved. So, I mean, I have had a glimpse of that, but my everyday experience is whatever I think I'm going to do, I usually end up doing it.
Yes, but not because you thought it. They're two separate things. Now
I don't get that.
Yeah, don't believe me. I don't want you to get that. I want you to see that.
There's a really good little experiment I do, Lindy, where you move your finger and then you think to yourself, I'm going to move my finger, and then you move your finger. And now think to yourself, I'm going to move my finger, but don't move your finger. And now really think, be like, I'm going to move my finger. I'm going to move my finger, but just don't move it. And it doesn't matter how much you hammer that at your finger, how much you think about it, how much that you can shout it in your head. Thinking about it will never move your finger. The movement of the finger comes from somewhere else, which is not your thoughts. You can't move your finger with your thoughts.
Getting that. I'm not seeing that.
Help me sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a little tricky, that one, Tom, because there'll be another thought hanging off that thought that says, I'm not going to move it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I.
Okay.
So
Try this one. Oh, sorry, Vince, go on.
yeah, go on, James, please.
I was going to say, Lindy, try this one. Just hold your hand up for a second. Move it randomly around. Who chose the way you moved it?
It just happened.
Exactly.
Mm. What I want you to do to make this tangible is be really specific about how you think you're going to make that cup of tea. So think to yourself, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to walk to the sink and I'm going to put my left foot in front of my right foot. So whatever. And then when I get there, I'm going to pick that cup because that's my favorite one. And I'm going to put my sugar in first or my milk in first, or I'm going to put my tea in, and then I'm going to put my water in, or I'm going to put my water in, I'm going to put my tea in, whatever way you normally do things, think that you're going to do that. Plan it out in your thoughts, right? To the really, really fine detail, what it is you're going to do, right? And then wait for 1 minute, that's enough. And then go and make a cup of tea. And as you make it, watch how closely you actually emulate what you thought you were going to do. And I'll guarantee you, I'll bet anything you like that you'll be doing a variation on that, not exactly the way you thought it.
That's absolutely true. And I am very aware that a lot of things, you think I'm going to do that, and then you've gone and done it without even realizing you've done it just because your body's done it. But it's almost like when you predict.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
You
see,
predict that I'm going to go to the bathroom
okay,
now.
so the actual issue
And 9
is,
times out of 10, I will go to the bathroom.
sure, yeah. And the actual issue here is that mind says that you did that on purpose, that you did it because you thought it. Mind makes the connection, but it's lying to you, right? The mind wants to please you. It wants to give you a sense of control. But you know there's no control. You know there's only an idea of control. It's like a choice. When you say, I'm going to make a choice, right? And you think, well, I'm going to decide to walk that way, or I'm going to decide to walk that way. And then when you do it, the mind turns around and says, well, you decided to walk that way and you did walk that way. Therefore, you did it. You did it on purpose. Therefore, you have control. But it's an illusion that they're connected. And you get examples of that illusion 100 times a day, but you just overlook them. You only take notice of the ones where it worked out. That's just the nature of mind.
Because there's something that sort of believes, I don't know, that knows that there isn't control. But it just seems that all the evidence is
No, not all
against
the
that.
evidence, just the mind. Just the mind.
Okay.
Now, let me tell you, 100% of your thoughts are bullshit. 100%. None of them are really legitimate. I used to say it's 99% and there was 1% useful thoughts, but I've changed my mind. I've changed my mind about that. I now believe it's 100% of that are bullshit. All right? Thoughts have a job, and that job is to protect you. Just like the self is really a suit of armor. It is there to protect you. And what's it protecting? It's actually protecting a construct. It's protecting itself. It's your ego that, if you like, if you want to put something tangible there, your ego has the job of making you feel okay. Right. So we know about ego when we get puffed up because we get a compliment and we get puffed up. But the opposite also is true. The ego will try and protect us when bad stuff happens, when bad feelings are there, it's still the ego saying, well, these bad feelings are not real good, but they're a lot more tolerable than what would really happen if we let go. So it's still trying to look after you. Your ego is trying to look after you, and your ego is entirely thoughts. Right? And then there's the response to those thoughts. And that's what, if you want to see a self as existing, that's what the self is. It's the response to the thought stories you have about who and what Lindy is. So
May I jump in?
yes, don't ask permission, please. If I can, I want to slap you.
I will share what helped me to see how things happens and how thoughts are getting attached on top of it. There is sensation in the body, say like thirst, and next thing there is thought, oh, I am thirsty. Or there is sensation in the body, like you need, like bladder is full, and next thing thought is, oh, I need to go to toilet. Or like Liberation Unleashed, they have this very good exercise. You do this like walk and then see like walking is happening, and then just say it like walking is happening, and then you do the same thing and say I am walking, and notice like there is no difference in action itself. It's just a thought. Or for example, like for example, when I was walking today, there is like a crossroad on the walk path, and like a thought, like which one to go, there, and just let the thought go. As soon as you approach to that, body just goes itself where that decides to go for whatever reasons, and calculation happens. You don't know how that is happening, but that's what helps me. I'm just sharing.
Yes, thank you very much. And I know I have touched into this, but at the moment it definitely feels like there isn't that gap. I think I'm going to do something, and I go and do it, and it's so prevalent, and I'm not quite sure how to have that gap or how to get underneath this, because it does seem like a pretty sticky, it seems like a sticky thing that is kind of possibly holding me up.
Yeah, that sticky thing is you believe your thoughts.
Body sensations.
Sorry?
That would help me. Maybe try to stay more in bodily sensations. Just attention in the sensations as much as you can during the day, and then you will notice what is happening in the body on sensory level instead of what's happening in the head, and how thoughts getting attached to that what is happening here.
I am doing that. I know that you're I've seen your video with Josh, and I've just started working with him too, so that's my instruction. So that is my main thing. Yeah, but as to talking about thoughts, it just brought this up for me again, that I get so pulled into believing that thoughts are what dictate what happens, and then I go logical. And I think, well, it's amazing that my thoughts get it right 9 times out of 10 if there's no causal thing. I think I'm going to meet friends tomorrow. Well, unless anything big happens, I guess I will meet my friends tomorrow.
And then you jump to a logical conclusion that one caused the other.
Yeah.
Now, so when I say, thoughts are the problem, it's easy for you to jump to a conclusion that you shouldn't have thoughts, but you don't control that either.
No,
So
I know that.
the appropriate thing to do is to just recognize what's happening. So if you have a thought that says, I had a thought I was going to make a cup of tea, and then I did make a cup of tea, therefore they are connected, just see that. You don't have to say, no, they're not, or I don't want to believe my thoughts. You don't have to say anything like that. Always welcome whatever arises, and just consider it in more detail. The more detail you look at it in, the more apparent what's actually going on becomes.
And Lindy, keeping it really simple, those two exercises or those two pointers that Anna gave, when you feel thirsty, just be really honest about what came first, the happening or the thought. And going to the toilet, same thing. Where did the thought occur? Before the happening or post the happening? It happens so quick, but just keep it simple.
That's what I meant about the gap, I think. You know, I find that quite true. And with some things, I can see that, the more obvious things that you've pointed out, but there seems to be an awful lot of other things during the day.
Well, take that exercise that Anna gave you and do that a little bit deeper again. So when you say, I'm going to make a cup of tea, right? Then say a cup of tea. Right? Watch the body when you say those two things. Or if you say walking across the room, that's probably a better example. I am walking across the room. Walking across the room is happening. Watch the body. One will tell you it's a lie, and your body will tell you one's a lie, and the body will tell you one is accurate. And it's that body yes, body no. Is there a slight contraction when you say, I am going to do this? Is there a sigh of acceptance when you say walking is just happening? Watch the body for the answer, not the head. Don't think about it. Watch what sensations. So here we learn to be more sensitive to the subtle things, the messages, the subtle messages that the body gives you. And it's doing it all the time. Your body is constantly signaling to you. But as soon as thought gets involved, we ignore the body.
Yes, that brings me to something else just quickly. When Leonard was saying, when about, you know, he was on the plane and he was saying, oh no, I'm going to be, you know, I'm going to be ill or catastrophizing. I literally felt just feeling in my body. And it seems that I then thought, why am I feeling that? And the thought came up, oh God, yes, that is exactly what I would be thinking if I was on the plane, but I wouldn't be able to get out of that thought pattern the way he managed to. And that then it just got worse and worse. So I was.
Yeah.
So that was a real body feeling, but
you can see it was also a response to that thought stream.
I felt that it was in the body first.
Or
did I? No, it was the thought. It was the thought. But I thought that when we talk about this, it seems that sensations don't come because of thoughts. They're already there. I thought I'd heard you say on here.
It is a tricky one, that one. No, sensations. Well, some sensations originally started as a result of story, but that story doesn't have to be a word story. And that can then get hardwired, if you know what I mean. So then it appears like the sensation is the beginning thing. But yeah, don't worry too much about that at the moment. That's something for a bit later on, I think. Yeah. But you just see it. It is. There's always these staging posts, so to speak, a place to look at things from, to recognize something that's valuable, and then you discard that and move on. And at this stage, it's more appropriate for you to just see that almost everything you think and everything you do is a response to some body sensation. We
Okay.
think we're leading.
Lindy, you know, you've been talking.
Go on, no,
You
you
know,
go.
you've been talking about positive things, like you say, oh, I'm going to make a cup of tea, and you go and make a cup of tea, and you're saying 9 times out of 10 those things happen. So that's evidence to you that the thoughts are making it happen. This happens to me. I don't know if it happens to you, but I have thoughts about things that are going to go wrong, and then they don't go wrong. So what's happening there? If it's your thoughts that are making things happen, like your thought is what prompts you to go and get a cup of tea, why is it if you have a thought, oh my God, I'm going to fall down the stairs, and you don't fall down the stairs? Or you see what I mean? Does
Oh,
that
that's
happen for you?
interesting. Ooh, that's kind of has hit. That's landed. Thank you. That's worth pondering, noticing. That's worth noticing as it happens. That's a good one, James. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always it's always productive to do things differently, and just so that you get the novelty of it makes things more apparent. And that's a different perspective. It's great. Yeah, that's good, James. That's good. You're going to be a great guide one day, I tell you. Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
There's one small thing I want to add, just because it's a way in which I could easily see myself being confused about everything that's been said previously, which is there have been many, I think, very actually creative ideas and suggestions of ways to kind of show to yourself or prove to yourself that thoughts are not the thing causally affecting what you do. And I think that can be very helpful for building those beliefs that the thoughts aren't what's doing it. But in my experience, no matter how much the thoughts can be convinced to believe that they are not what's controlling things, the thoughts themselves can never see that. What I mean by that is that because they aren't doing it, they're never going to be able to see it. You can, and it's sort of this perspective shift I mentioned before. And it's not exactly the bodily sensations. I'm actually still trying to figure out body sensations. So maybe that works really well if you can tune into it. But it's rather once you just feel whatever this other perspective that is not thought, that is doing, that's the only perspective that can see that thoughts are not doing it. So you can, I think it's helpful, it was for me to like really build confidence empirically, logically through experiment that thoughts aren't doing things, but just to set expectations. In my experience, the thoughts will never be able to see that. They can believe it, but they cannot see it. I don't know if that distinction makes sense, but it would have been very important for me to distinguish that before.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I have had the actual evidence for 24 hours. I did have a shift in perspective a few years ago, and you know, a couple of things happened, and I thought, oh my goodness, yeah, thoughts were way behind the action starting, and I could actually see it because there was a gap there when I had that different perspective. But it seems a long time ago, and it was, you know, a very small window in what appears to be a continuum of my life. And it feels like there's so much evidence to the contrary, but I guess I just need to examine it a bit further, really.
Yeah. Well, you also, how long do you have to be away from the fridge before you can convince yourself that there really is a peach in there? After you've looked and seen there's none a couple of times, why would you want to go back and look again? And even if you've been away from the fridge for a day, unless you can think of some other way that a peach has appeared in there, there's still not going to be one in there. So it doesn't matter.
I
that
realise that. I just don't seem to be able to control in any way my thoughts in the, you know, in that way, in the evidence way.
Yeah,
it just
right.
seems
And you can't, of course
always,
you can't. Yeah.
That's, you know, and the only way that those might change is by talking to people here and giving me a new perspective that might just, you know, on individual things that I just think, oh yeah, well, perhaps if I think about it like that, because that has happened before, you know, because I can't do it for myself. I can investigate so far,
Yeah,
but
that's right.
quite often I just don't feel I don't feel able to investigate further, however hard I try.
Oh, there's great value in being able to talk to other people about this stuff.
Mm.
Okay, look, I'm seeing we're coming up to
Thank you.
3 hours. And so, anybody else wants to jump in, let's do that before we finish up here today.
Yeah, is it really that that you see what's actually happening? Or is it just that thoughts stop making sense? Like here, it just seems like thoughts just don't make sense. When somebody explains something conceptually, maybe it doesn't make sense.
In my experience, especially during that brief glimpse, thoughts still perfectly tracked what was happening, right? The correlation was still there. So there was no reason to suspect, based on what the thoughts were, that they were incorrect. It's just that there was the other perspective, not thoughts, that was where actions, happenings was coming from. And that made it clear that it was not the thoughts that were doing things, but there was nothing different or weird about the thoughts that would have brought suspicion to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's all about
Yeah.
our relationship to our thoughts. Like some people talk about thoughts not being there, thoughts stop. That's not something I've experienced. Well, kind of, but I don't take any notice of them. They're in the background. I don't even know what they're going on about half the time. So it's our relationship to our thoughts that changes more than our actual thoughts. Yeah. But thoughts seem to have a way of demanding attention, that they'll either seduce us or they'll be aggressive. One way or the other, they want attention, and in order, I'm friends with my thoughts. I can tell them to fuck off and they don't take offense. They just do it.
Yeah, because on LU, people talk a lot about like seeing the process of causality or something. The experience here is when there's a moment of just there's a gap, that it's just that everything stops making sense, but not like, oh, this is really happening, or this is how this is happening, or something. It's just the end of, I don't know. That's
The whole idea of making sense is giving thoughts some value that they don't actually have.
Yeah.
They're not even alive.
Exactly.
Don't attribute qualities of an entity to a thought. It can't, it has no knowledge, it has no imagination, it has no power. And James, to what you said a while ago, the fourth prong of that test is, what happens if a thought says something's going to happen and it doesn't happen? Are there any consequences? And the answer is no. If you don't fall down the steps, there's no consequences, which illustrates the point. The thought had no power. So just think of thoughts as not being alive, just an announcement, a loudspeaker at a football game, and it'll become a little clearer. Maybe. Who knows?
That was actually really
Thoughts are
helpful for
like
me.
subtitles running down on the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
They really are.
completely neutral, completely unrelated. It's just like
Like one of those marquees on a theater. The little words are going around. You say, "Oh,
yeah.
well, they don't know
Yeah.
anything. They're just lights."
Okay. We'll finish up then.
Thank you, Vince. Bye all.
There's always next time. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Love
Everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Vince.